Olga from Minerva. Today's video is a sew-along for the Vogue 8595 pattern. This pattern is for a loose-fitting lined cape with a collar and front button. It has side, front, and back seams, side front openings for your hands, and it comes in 3 different lengths. View A is a short hip length, View B is a longer above the knee length, and View C is a full ankle length cape. We'll be making View B today, but the instructions don't really differ that much from each view, so the only thing that really changes is obviously the length and how many buttons you're going to be applying at the end. This pattern is labeled as very easy and is a really good project for a beginner or a nice quick sew for a more confident sewer. The sizing ranges from extra small to double XL, but you'll need to select the sizing range you want from the drop-down menu on our website when you're ordering. For this pattern, they recommend that we use wool blends, tweeds, brocades, or taffeta. So let me show you what fabrics and materials I used to make this version. For the main fabric, I went with our Minerva Core Range 100% pure wool coating in this beautiful deep red shade. This fabric is a knit and therefore has some stretch in it. 30% widthways and 15% lengthways. It has a width of 140 centimeters or 55.1 inches. It also has a boiled wool texture and a coating weight as well. For the lining, I used our Minerva Core Range Anti-Static Super Soft Lining in color 79, which is a perfect red color. This lining is indeed super soft and my absolute favorite lining to work with. It's soft and light without being too slippery, and it sews really nicely too. Plus, it comes in a whole rainbow of colors. The composition of this fabric is 100% polyester, and it has a width of 160 centimeters or 63 inches. For the interfacing, I used the Vilene Vliezolene medium iron-on interfacing in white. For the buttons, I used the hemline round metallic buttons in red. They have a gold edge and measure 2.2 centimeters. For thread, we're using the Gutermann Sew All polyester sewing thread in the color 909, or you can use our thread matching service if you choose a different color of fabric. As always, all of these items are going to be linked below, so you'll have everything you need to sew along with me. And remember to save this video so that you can follow along at your own pace. After cutting our paper pattern pieces, we'll fold our fabric with right sides together and place the paper pattern on top. As always, we'll want to keep the grain lines in mind. The term grain line refers to the direction on the fabric a pattern should be cut. The grain line is the direction parallel to the selvages of the fabric, going vertically with the length of the fabric. On each pattern piece, there will be a long line with an arrow that indicates the grain line. Once I had all my paper pattern pieces correctly placed on the fabric, I went ahead and cut it out. After cutting, I also transferred the notches and markings to the fabric. Wool can be hard to mark with pens and chalks, so I did use tailor's tacks for the markings I needed most, such as the openings for the arms. Tailor's tacks are a way of marking the fabric with thread, where you insert the thread through and just leave a tail on each side of the fabric. I then repeated this process for the lining and also cut out my interfacing pieces. I interfaced one of the collar pieces and the front as per the instructions. To fuse this interfacing, I applied the iron on medium heat for about 8 seconds. Then, with right sides together, I pinned the fronts to the side fronts, making sure to match the notches and tailor's tacks. When stitching, I left the space between the tailor's tacks free and backstitched at these points to reinforce my seams. To finish the seams, I clipped the curvier parts and pressed them open with my iron on the wool setting. I also pressed the opening edges between the tailor's tacks open, following the seam allowance. Next, I pinned each side back sections to a side of the back section with right sides together, matching the notches. I stitched that in place, clipped my seams, and pressed them open. Then I went ahead and pinned the front to the back at the sides with right sides together, making sure to match the notches. After stitching that in place, I clipped the seams, focusing on the curved ones especially, and pressed the seam allowances open with the help of my tailor's ham. Next, I evened out the hem, and instead of finishing it with a narrow hem as suggested by the pattern, I simply folded over the seam allowance once and stitched that in place on my machine, as I found a narrow hem would be too bulky in this fabric. This should be tucked into the lining, plus this fabric doesn't fray or shed, so it's not going to be a problem either way. I finished it off by giving it a good press and put it to the side to start working on the collar. With right sides together, I pinned the collar sections around the unnotched edge. Then I stitched that in place, trimmed the excess, and clipped the curves. Turned it right side out and gave it a good press. Next, I basted the raw edges together by hand with matching thread. Finally, I top stitched the collar all around except on the basted edge. Now I was ready to pin the collar to the neck edge of the cape, matching the notches, and baste that by hand as well. With that, I was ready to start working on the lining. The steps to put the lining together are the exact same as for the cape. So when I had all my lining put together, I evened out the hem again and finished it. To do that, I first folded up 3.2 centimeters or 1¼ inches and pinned that down. Then I stitched that down on my machine. Finally, I trimmed off the excess seam allowance. Now I could pin the lining to the cape with right sides together, matching the notches and seams, but leaving the hems free. I found using quilting clips very helpful for the collar section. stitched it all in place, I trimmed the excess seam allowance and clipped the curves and corners. Then I turned the lining to the inside and pressed all around. I also went ahead and top stitched the cape all around at this point to help avoid the lining from rolling to the outside in the future. Then I pinned the lining and the cape together at the opening edges on the front. I slip stitched that closed with matching thread and small stitches to keep it as invisible as possible. To finish, I also top stitched the openings, squaring the stitches above and below the opening, pivoting at the corners. Next, I used the guide for buttonholes on the right front of the cape to mark out where I wanted my buttons to go. The pattern suggests we use 1 button for views B and C and 3 for A, but since these buttons came in sets of 2, I went ahead and used them both. Using my buttonhole foot, I stitched the buttonholes down. Then I used the buttonholes to mark where I needed to sew my buttons and stitch them down by hand. Last but not least, I tacked the lining to the cape at the hem along the inside using long, loose stitches. I'm really pleased with how easy this pattern came together, and I feel it would be a really good one for a beginner or even a more confident sewist, like I said at the beginning. Although this fabric is a knit, it isn't super stretchy and it's actually very easy to work with and to sew with. As with all knits, you do have to remember not to stretch it as you are pinning and sewing. As for the fits, I think this is a really good shape. It goes with a lot of things in my wardrobe personally, and you could see that it had a lot of space for my skirts in that footage that I showed you. It's very warm and cozy for somebody like me who mostly wears skirts and mostly wears a lot of petticoats under them. It just means that I get to be warm and have something cover my skirt without being crushed, and it just keeps me a little bit warmer in the winter. Plus, the armholes mean that you can actually put your hands inside and warm them on your body, which is a real bonus for me because I always have cold hands. If you do make your own version, please share it with us because we would love to see it. In order to do that, make sure that you have your own account with us. It's totally free, and then you can post videos and photos of all of the things that you're making and, you know, share them with the community. You can also tag the products that you use to help fellow makers find them more easily. It's a great place to meet like-minded people who have the same interests as you and to find some sewing inspiration. As a final note, the dress that I'm wearing in this video is the Vogue 9076 in our Minerva exclusive Brushstroke Blooms Viscose Challis. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye!